In the next session on the 03, we look at the following objectives to understand some key lean concepts which are focusing on the frontline execution, to understand the collaborative planning system or CPS better, and then to understand the various schedules for workflow reliability, starting from the milestone master schedule, phase schedules, the look ahead planning and weekly planning, also the constraint analysis. If you look at some of the key basic lean concepts, value is the main concept. The entire project is working towards creating value for the client. That's the main thing. Values as opposed to waste. We want to eliminate all kinds of wastage because waste doesn't create value for the client. So, if the focus is primarily and consistently and continuously on creating value for the client, then we are on the right track. And in that quest, we don't look at the isolated individual activities, but we are going to look at the overall flow. Whatever is creating value, it's in a continuous flow of work. We want to focus on that. And then again, if you look at typical sites, from one activity to another activity, people tend to push the work down to the succeeding activity. For example, a rebar compared to a concreting activity. The rebar man is not concerned whether the concreting man is ready with the front, ready with the method, labor, all those things. He will keep on producing rebars, and they all keep lying, whether used or unused, we don't know. And what does that entail? That's actually work in progress. That involves working capital, which is not productive. Till the rebars get embedded in the concrete, get properly built and get paid by the client, is not creating value. So, we have unnecessary work production which is not contributing to the client. So, we tend to push the work, not pull, tend to push the work. But if you adopt a pull approach, the concreting man dictates the sequence. He says, today I require so many tons of rebar of the various types. Tomorrow I require a different quantity and so on. And the rebar man produces according to this kind of requirement. Then whatever he produces is going to be utilized gainfully. That's called pulling the work. So, each succeeding activity pulls work quantity and quality wise from the preceding activity to the extent it can handle. So, there is no buffering, there is no unnecessary stock, no WIP or work in progress, and we have better value creation all the time. So, this pull versus push is a very important concept of lean, and please understand that very thoroughly right at this stage. And then with multiple theatres of operation, we need to ensure perfect coordination. What happens in a typical site? You have the frontline people, you have the service suppliers, for example, the P&M man, stores man, labor supplier, material supplier, and so on. All the coordination is being done by the planning manager. The request for something goes from the concerned person to the planning manager, and then he coordinates. A feedback goes to him, then again talks to somebody else. So, all your communications are vertical, from the concerned department to the planning manager, and then again in return. So, the planning manager is overburdened with the coordination work, and there is no communication across the levels where the actual work is taking place. In contrast to this, if you allow the people actually doing the work to communicate to the suppliers of services, materials, equipment, labor, and so on, then they can communicate better among themselves, telling exactly when they require something, what they require, how, what form, all that, and they get an assurance in return. So, the coordination becomes much better. The biggest bugbear of today's construction is lack of coordination, and that bug we need to beat by ensuring there is proper coordination at the level of people actually doing the work. That's what happens there. And if you look at a typical factory, day after day, the products keep getting produced in a controlled manner, in a predictable manner. So, the owner can definitely say, on a given day, I am going to produce so many units. That's called production. Whereas in a construction site, a project, it doesn't happen because we are not in that kind of mode of production. Whereas if you are able to organize the construction project as a production system, with more reliability, more certainty, then you can predict better, saying that I will produce so much of quantum of work on every day as per planning. And that's where lean comes in by all these systems. And again, we don't depend only on the planning manager or the frontline as different entities, different systems. We ensure that they all work as a combined unit, as a well-oiled network. There is good communication between the planning team, the execution team, the supplies team. They're all properly interlinked and working as a collaborative team. That's the key to lean also. So look at the triad. If you look at the triad, what we call the triad, you have impeccable coordination. We have project as a collective enterprise with all the units working together. And then finally, we get the project as a production system where we get good reliability and good certainty. So with all this, we are able to minimize wastage. We are able to have continuous improvement with a good, robust feedback system, and we have collaborative working. So these are combined together, forming what is called the collaborative planning system, or a takeoff from the last planner system. I'll explain to you later. If you look at the conventional way of working with a large critical path network, MS project or Primavera or whatever it is, it's all made well in advance of the work actually being done. You have too many activities spanning across too large a time. So you're not able to have good control and you don't know exactly what is going to happen downstream. So in lean, what we do, we start with the overall network, very, very broad granularity. We have what is called the master schedule. The master schedule actually looks at the main milestones, the broad understanding, contractual agreement between the client and the contractor. So we don't go into too much detail at this stage. We have the broad item of the sequence and the timelines. And then we split up the project into a number of phases. For example, a group of buildings, we can say each building will be one different phase. Or a multi-story building, we can say so many floors first phase, so many floors second phase, or the services will come in a subsequent phase. So we split up the project into a number of phases which we can control, understand and coordinate in a much better manner. Then what we do, we come down, we narrow our focus still more from the overall master schedule, we come to the phase schedules, then we take up a portion of the work in the next 6 to 8 weeks, for example. It can be anything from 3 weeks to 16 weeks, depending on the size of project. We have what is called a look ahead window. We focus on the works which are going to be done in the near future. So we have better understanding of where exactly we stand with respect to the overall timeline, and we know what problems were encountered previously, and we can actually address these problems in advance, prima facie or beforehand. So we make the look ahead schedule with the activities in a proper sequence, in a proper time frame, and then from the look ahead window, we carve out weekly works. Every week, we have, for example, a 6-week look ahead window. It's actually a rolling window. Today, for example, I look at 1 to 6. The next week, I will look at 2 to 7. Third week, I will look at 3 to 8, and so on. We keep on rolling down. So when you come to the 6th week, for example, I would have looked at the 6 weeks works 6 times beforehand. So I know exactly what is going to happen at the end of 5 weeks. In the 6th week, I anticipate the potential constraints, why the works in the 6th week cannot be done or can be done. I plan for it beforehand and I keep reviewing that every week. So when I come down to that, my uncertainties are all addressed previously, and any smart project team would have removed the constraints by the time. So the works which are coming up in the 6th week will flow through very smoothly, very comfortably, without any strain. And that's why we come to the weekly schedule as a part of the look ahead window. And then within the week, every day we look at the work. In the weekly schedule, what we do, we plan what will be done on Monday, Tuesday up to Saturday. And every day, we say, okay, today we have planned this much work. We start in the morning and come to the evening, and we take a process check whether we could complete what we planned or not on the given day. If not done, we analyze the reasons. We don't just keep quiet. We want to find out why I could not achieve what I planned for that given day. And then I have what is called a root cause analysis. I don't accept the ostensible or apparent cause. I dig deep and find out the real root cause why I could not accomplish what I set out to accomplish in the morning. And then we make corrective measures. So the next day when I go into the project and start doing my activities, I am able to complete them in a much better certainty and achieve what I plan to achieve. So if you look at the progression of control, we start with the master schedule, the phase schedules, the look ahead planning, and the weekly planning and the daily planning. So it all goes in a smooth flow, and then every time my focus is narrowing down into smaller and smaller focus till I focus on the given day. If you look at this particular slide, you will notice two important things: the feedback cycles. For example, from the weekly schedule, we have a feedback coming into the look ahead schedule, and from the daily planning again we have a feedback coming into the weekly schedule. So each time if we are not able to meet our commitments or promises, we find out the reasons. I told you about the root cause analysis. Then we apply the learnings into the previous cycle. For example, weekly planning, we keep on finding that a particular equipment's productivity is less than what we planned, what we envisaged. So next time, for the next week planning, we take the revised input and then plan accordingly. So again, we don't make a mistake of not being able to meet our commitment. Same way with the daily planning, we find in the current week, we are having a, say like monsoon conditions. The productivity is less than what we planned. So the next week, we know that again there is going to be a problem. So we apply the feedback. So when we do the weekly schedule for the next day, next week, we take that learning into account. So the feedback cycle is very, very important. So the look ahead schedule, it helps you to have a control on the workflow, because we are looking at the next, something like 5 to 10 weeks or 15 weeks like that, and we plan the work accordingly. So we are clear about the workflow. Where do we head from today towards the end? How are we progressing? That flow is properly controlled. And then the actual production that takes place on only the daily basis. So the weekly planning and the daily planning, they constitute the actual production control. So we have the workflow control and we have the production control, and all linked upon a feedback cycle. So then the reliability improves much better, and the overall production also. We are heading towards the project as a production system that we should keep into account. So, and how do we do that? We look at the workflow and eliminate constraints beforehand, and then there is a method of doing the weekly planning. I will come to it later, where the commitment level is very high. So I will explain to you right now. In the weekly planning, what we do, we have a big, what's called a big room. The big room concept is again another very interesting concept in Lean. We say that, when people are talking to each other across the phone or through drawings or through third parties and all that, a lot of communication gap is there. So you put all the interested parties, the related parties in a single big room, let them talk to each other among themselves and come to their settlements. I want some services from another person. I am the concreting man. I want so much of formwork, so much of rebar, a batching plant, a transfer mixer, labor, and so on. I don't talk to the planning manager directly. I talk to all these individual suppliers, and they tell me yes, they can or they cannot give, and I plan my work accordingly. And then there may be some other downstream man, for example, the electrical conduit man. He may come and ask me, are you going to give me the floor by that given date so I can do my electrical work? I say yes or no, depending on what I am able to get from the others. So if you look at the reliability of commitments, I am getting a commitment from my friends, my colleagues, are all in the same room, and we are talking to each other across the room, and we get the commitment. So the reliability of commitments, that goes much more, and consequently the predictability, that again improves, and the variability comes down. And conventionally, all the planning, even the daily planning, is normally done by the planning manager in consultation with the project manager. And there is a big disconnect between the frontline people and the planning team. And in Lean, what happens? We get this last mile planning, the look ahead planning and the weekly planning by the very frontline supervisors. They get into the big room, and they have the other stakeholders, the service suppliers, and the whoever else is interacting with these people. They're all there in the same room, and the planning is done at that level, and all the promises are given and taken among friends, among colleagues in the same room. So again, the certainty level keeps on increasing. And how do we start the work? From A to B, we start from the end. We pull work. So it starts in a reverse manner. Conventional planning is done from front to end. Here we start from the end and work backwards in a reverse scheduling by the pull process. For example, the electrical man says, I'm going to do so much of electrical work. I require so much of concrete area to be given to me. And the concrete man says, I want so much of form work and rebar. And again, it goes backwards like this in a reverse planning process. So at every stage, there is a pull planning going on instead of each activity trying to push unwanted work to the next succeeding work, where it just gets piled up as work in progress, which is a total waste. So this basic concept came from something called the last planner concept, which is the trademark of the Lean Construction Institute of US. Two great people of Lean, Mr. Greg Hubble and Dr. Glenn Ballard of Lean Construction Institute US, they were the people who formulated the initial concept, and today we have it practiced all over the world in different forms. So looking at the collaborative planning system of production control in a better manner, all the frontline people now are fully empowered. Earlier, they were having a total disconnect from planning. Somebody tells them what to do, they just go and do it. But now the planning is done by themselves and they are fully empowered. And then, they use the pull process to improve the workflow, and the variability is again tracked. There's a great factor called PPC, or Plan Person Complete. The Plan Person Complete measures how many promises on a given day we have completed in full. If I say that, I have planned to do 6 activities, I do all the 6, I get 100% PPC. If I do, for example, 5 activities out of 6, I get 5 out of 6, something like 80%. So PPC is a tool which measures a number of things indirectly. So after having done a look ahead planning, weekly planning, talking to my colleagues and all that, if I am not able to achieve 100% PPC, then we need to understand why. So PPC is a great factor in that respect. And then we can keep on improving the process further by including more and more people in the big room. We can get your subcontractors, we can get the vendors. So whenever somebody wants a promise or to make a promise, we have all these stakeholders, all the wherewithals in the same space and talking to each other.